in Iraq, election came as a result of the protests by people in Iraq. They wanted change, they wanted so many reforms and things like that. So according to your experience with the Iraqis, what they need to do now?
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be back in Kurdistan and in Iraq. I have been very busy with Afghanistan the last few years, so I'm very pleased to be back here. Although I haven't followed the details of Iraq and Kurdistan for the last couple of years, but it's obviously the next step is for the certification of the results, and after that, of course, a government has to be formed. I hope it will be done soon. But sometimes my experience has been that it takes a very long time to get a government agreed to. But I hope that this time it will be done as soon as possible.
So you spoke about Afghanistan, and unfortunately you know what that great people are going through nowadays. Right. In the film festival of yesterday, I met a number of Afghanistan artists there. So because you worked on that for the last 3 years, and before that, prior to that, you worked with the Iraqis, with the presidents, with the officials. Do you think that we have so many things in common and we need to fix the problem that we have?
Right. Well, yes, of course, Afghans and Kurds in particular have a lot in common.
Yeah, that's right.
But there are differences as well, of course. I feel bad for Afghanistan, although the fact that the war is over and that 200 to 300 people are not dying every day is a good thing. But they have some distance to go to establish an inclusive government that represents all of Afghanistan. And second, that the rights of all Afghans are respected, men and women. And the international community still has unfinished business in Afghanistan. We need to use diplomacy now that the troops are out, political relations, economic relations, including unfreezing of the monies of Afghanistan in the United States and Europe, so that the humanitarian, the economic conditions that, do not deteriorate so much that the economic collapse takes place. That will be a tragedy. Winter is coming, and the international community needs to do its part to help. But the Afghan political leaders, particularly now the Taliban who are in the power, need to do their part. What they have agreed to is to have an inclusive government and to respect the rights of all Afghans. They need to do that in a way that gives confidence to the international community. Also, terrorism is very important. They shouldn't allow Afghanistan to be used by extremists. On Iraq and on Kurdistan, I think the lesson is to take advantage of the opportunity that when you have it, to address the problems.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not.
And today they have addressed so many problems, but it's not just about addressing.
But the addressing is not just to, the first thing is to recognize them. Of course, that's important. You have to know what is the problem.
To acknowledge it.
Acknowledge it, and then not to just have a discussion. It's not although we are at a university, and discussions are one of the tasks, but for governments, for leaders, it is to find formulas that can get agreement between the key forces of this country, Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq, so to accept each other and to build a formula that is acceptable, voluntarily acceptable, not by force, but voluntarily acceptable and workable, because that makes it legitimate then, and it can be stable and lasting. And in the past, the record has been to not to agree first easily to a formula, and then have the formula but agree to it but not implement it.
Yeah. So it's all about implementation.
Yes, that's what the key is. So that's the lesson that I like to impart to Kurdistan and to Iraq.
Yeah, you spoke about terrorism. You know that ISIS is still a threat in Iraq. Do you think if the political powers in Iraq, the Kurds, Arabs, Sunni, Shia, all of them are not going to hurry up in forming a good government that Iraqis will love, and it's going to be somehow solving their problems. The problem of ISIS is going to reappear again in a more powerful form.
Well, it is clear that problems, difficulties, challenges, poverty, lack of services, lack of political agreement that has brought support creates opportunities for the growth of extremist terrorists, whether it's ISIS or something else. When I was in Iraq, it was Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which was the big problem, and then we managed to defeat it. But then Iraqi problems and the problems of Syria and some of the actions of some of the countries created the ISIS problem.
So out of this, it is the Qaeda, but in different names.
Yeah, so you could have the son of ISIS if you don't have ISIS. So the problem of terrorism needs not only security steps, that's important. The Peshmerga did a great job. Iraqis and international coalition forces worked hard to decimate ISIS, but the important longer-term steps are more the political steps, the economic steps, the services steps that are required, employment opportunities for people. Desperate situations create desperate people become terrorists. So as one of the factors that influence that. So it's very important. Iraq has the resources that if there was a government that reflected the partnership and the will of the people, including the, as you said, the Kurds, the Shia, the Sunni, Arabs, and with a good program, not only on paper, but then implementing it as agreed, that it should have good prospects.
So one more question. You know that one of my guests said that it is very bad that some powers, political parties in Iraq think and regard Kurds as a minority in Iraq, and it is going to cause so many problems in the future. Do you think that in Iraq and in Kurdistan region we need to go far away from looking at each other as enemies, and instead of that trying to create a ground that will gather them all together to solve the problems?
Sure. Well, I mean, the key issue is that there are different communities here. Different, even one could say, in the case of course, a different nationality, even an ethnic group, which is a very large one, and not only here, but in neighboring countries as well.
Actually, it is a blessing, but here it works as a curse.
Yeah, so the question would be, what is the formula in the first instance for Iraq to live, to coexist with mutual acceptance and mutual respect? I thought that when I was here as ambassador and we helped with the constitution, that that was a document that both sides agreed to, but it hasn't been applied. There has been problems with the application, and so this new government must commit itself to fairly implement that document, because if you don't implement it, it will create its own problems, and people would look at the alternatives.
We witnessed that too.
Yes, so I think that with the changes in the world, with the technology happening, water issues, climate change, with more more people. Now Iraqis are growing in numbers.
It's not just political problems. Now we have different types of problems.
And the region that is not functioning always very well. So unity among Iraqis based on mutual respect and mutual acceptance, agreeing to a formula, then implementing it is the best way for Iraq to proceed.
So what's irony that during Saddam's reign, all the Kurds, Arabs, Shiites, Sunnis, they were working with each other. But now after Saddam, which is a totally new phase, but instead of working with each other, they are somehow working against each other.
I don't know whether I would agree with you that under Saddam things were better. I don't think so. Saddam used chemical weapons against that.
Not for. I'm speaking about the political
people.
party, the oppositions.
The opposition to Saddam, they worked well together.
I mean
oh
that.
yes,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean
Now I understand. No, I think it's very important that governing is more difficult than opposition. Opposition is easier. You just say negative things about the other side, and you try to do negative things. Yeah, but when you're responsible for solving problems, responding to the needs of your people, compromising, then not only making a decision, making sure it's implemented, that the decision has enough resources behind it that can actually make it happen, it's much harder. And compromise sometimes is difficult. But once there is an agreement on a document like the Constitution, it must be honored and implemented for it. Otherwise, it would lose its legitimacy, and that would not be good. So I think that with the new government to be formed, this is a new chapter, a new opportunity for Iraqi leaders to agree on a government that's a partnership government that means that the key groups, Shia, Sunni, and Kurds, are all involved in decision making on critical issues, whether it's security, whether it's on oil, whether it's on budget, and that they work together and implement it in a fair, balanced way, and that will increase connectivity, partnership, and cooperation.
So I said one more question, but I'm going to ask you the last question. So as a journalist, I really need a frank answer from your side. As Mr. Khalilzad, with all your experiences in Iraq, are you positive about the future of Iraq, depending on what we have and what you see and what you witness?
Well, the future of Iraq is in the hands of the leaders of Iraq,
yes,
different communities. So they really face big choices. Either they accept each other and implement a formula that is acceptable, or people would look at alternatives. And I think it's agreeing to a formula. The Constitution has specified what that formula is, and then behaving, operating very much both in terms of the letter of the Constitution and the spirit of the Constitution is, I think, the right approach right now. But if it doesn't work, then people will look at alternatives.
Because all the people, the majority of people, agreed upon that constitution, that document in a referendum, a democratic referendum. So now they need to
implement it. For example, the Constitution does not allow for use of force against each other. So the differences have to be resolved politically, not by force. That's one of the lessons from the previous era. So there are many good things about the Constitution, and it was a difficult process that produced it. A lot of time and work was spent. It was the Kurds were largely independent of Iraq at that time, but they came back into Iraq because of the Constitution.
Yeah,
so the Constitution needs to be respected and implemented.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Khalilzad.
Very nice to talk with you.
Thank you
very
much.
Great to be with you.
Thank you very much.